We're going to begin by looking at and talking about transient designers, or sometimes you'll hear it referred to as a transient shaper. That's probably a more apt definition for what this processor does because it literally shapes the transient. But you need to understand what a transient is first if you're going to use one of these things. So the transient in any sound is the loudest part of that sound by definition. Okay, so if we look at this clap sound here, and I've already brought it down, I think by about 6 dB. Let's take a look and see where it sits on the meter right now. Sitting at -1, so I'm going to bring this down to -6, and then hopefully we should be in the right ballpark. Good. The transient of this is going to be the loudest peak in the sound. So that's around this area right here. This is technically the transient. But when we're dealing with transient shapers and transient designers, typically they're used on sounds that have a very easily defined and identifiable attack and decay stage. All right, so the attack is sharp, and it's something that's really poking through, as it is in this sound. And then we have the decay stage as follows. And then with the transient designer, all we're doing is setting up settings so that it will adjust the transient portion of the sound, meaning you can either bring it up or you can bring it down. And if you use the clip gain, you can actually kind of do the same thing. So let's go ahead here and identify where the transient is. It's right around this area here. Put a point here. I'll put a point after it. And I'm just going to bring this up, make sure we're not clipping. And let's take a listen to this now. So this is the post-processing, and this is the pre-processing here. So here it is with the extra attack. We'll just listen to the beginning part of the envelope. So you can hear how it's sharper in this instance where we've brought up the level. And that's really what a transient designer is doing. On the flip side, it could do the opposite, and it could bring this down quite a bit. In fact, I'd even have to bring this portion of the sound down as well, to the point where the transient is almost completely gone. But the advantage to this is that I could then go in here and I could bring the gain up on this signal and not have to worry about clipping. So that's what the transient designer, transient shaper is doing. And it's kind of up to you whether or not you want to go into clip gain and mess around and get the sound just as you want it, or if you want to use the plugin. The plugin's going to sound different than what we're able to accomplish here by using clip gain. So it kind of just comes down to your ear and what it is you want to do. And in many cases, don't forget, if a sound is fitting in just nicely, just fine when you're making your music, don't worry about doing anything to the sound at all. Only use this in the case where you feel like you need it. Okay, and it's possible that when you're starting, let's say, a drum beat, you may not feel like you need it right away, but as you go further on and you're progressing deeper and some things are getting lost, or you're really losing the pronounced attack on that snare sound, maybe then you go to the transient designer or transient shaper. Commonly, you're going to find these used on sounds, like I said, that have an easily identifiable attack and decay stage. So something like a pluck sound. For example, someone plucking a guitar. There's that pluck at the beginning that's really identifiable to the sound, and then, it decays away. Somebody striking a piano key really hard would be another example of when a transient designer might come in handy. Let's think of another example. Any kind of drum sound, a hi-hat, a snare, a kick, anything that's struck, that's where you're going to find transient designers typically used, but you can experiment with them anywhere you'd like. The freeware transient designer that we're going to be using is called BitterSweet, and you can see that I've put it in the correct folder here for us, Dynamics Transient Designer. There it is. Okay, so when I bring this in here, it's a very easy plugin to use and has fairly simple controls. Either you're going to make the sound more bitter or you're going to make it more sweet. So if I go towards bitter, that's going to be enhancing the transient. If I go towards sweet, that's going to be bringing that transient part of the sound down. So as I said before in the last video, time control is really important in most dynamic processors, and it's definitely true in this one. Even though it's this tiny little control down here, this is determining the actual length of the transient, right? So if it's really low here, chances are it's only going to be grabbing a really small portion of the sound. And that's not what we want. We actually want it to be getting the full transient effect. So I'm just going to go back into the sound here, make sure that I turn this down by 6, and let's make sure that we have 6 dB to work with. We do. Fantastic. And I'm going to start to push this towards bitter, okay? And let's see what happens with our metering here. As I'm increasing the bitterness amount, you can see that we're losing headroom, right? We're going from that -6 to that -9, and that means that the transient is being brought up. That's exactly what's going on there. If I turn the link control off, it's probably going to go way into the red here. Oh, nope, it stayed there. But this link control is going to allow me to either turn this volume up or down manually, which is what I kind of usually like to do. So I'll turn link off. We'll put this back to like 0. And you can see that we're getting really close to going over. If I go any higher, we're going to start to be clipping. So if I was to do that, I then have to go and compensate here in the gain. So with the period set to 20, that's probably not long enough for this actual sound. So I'm going to increase this period. And again, let's watch and see what's happening to our gain over here on the left. Aha. Okay, so what this is saying is that as we're going a little bit further into the sound, as we're letting the transient be a larger period, we're getting to the actual larger peak of the sound, the actual transient, which is occurring here. So I probably need to increase the period length even a little bit more, and then just keep an eye on my gain. Let's bypass and listen to the before, and now the after. And then we have 3 additional settings, which is going to determine how that transient is being like brought up or brought down. Is it happening really quickly? Is it going more slow or medium? So you'll hear a big difference here between fast and slow, and chances are it's probably going to, again, go into the red here. Yeah, so with slow, it's going very slow. It's analyzing that period at quite a slow amount, and it's bringing the gain way, way up. So let's try medium and see where we're at. Still quite a bit. If I bring the sound down, the output level, that's not going to work very well. I think fast is going to be the best option here. And again, we'll do a before and after comparison. Before, not really hearing the transient pop out at all. After, some serious transient pop. And it also sounds like it's bringing up the overall level. So what I might do in this situation is bounce this out. Okay, and we can first of all see the difference here and just looking at where the transient's sitting, a lot louder. And I could then go in and I could use clip gain to then manually make some adjustments. So let's take a listen. Maybe I'd go in here and actually suck this down even more after the transient hits. And then before that. And I actually like it a little bit more by doing this manually. And then if I wanted to just cut the sound off, I could. Or give it a little bit more. So I kind of like that. So this is where we started from. Let's just make sure we turn off that transient designer. So we started here and finished here. So if you wanted, you could actually do the opposite then as well. So this is going to be interesting. Let's go back to this, turn this on, and let's now go to the sweet side. So now we're going to be pulling back on that transient. And again, let's watch our meters. And remember, if this is at 0, this should be peaking out around -6. And then with this on. So now I could actually add additional gain on the other side. Let's try the medium setting. The slow. That sounds kind of cool. Okay, so let's listen to this one and then our processed on the bitter side. And then nothing. I could bounce that and take a look at it as well. So that's how the BitterSweet is really working. And I'll show you guys just one more example here of how you can maybe use this particular plugin. Another place you might consider using the BitterSweet could be on something like a piano or on a string instrument that's being plucked. And if I bring this in and I listen to this piano without any sort of processing, you'll notice that it's a very soft piano, and it's actually why I really like it, but it doesn't have a whole lot of a transient hit at the start of it. So I could maybe bring this on here and start to add a little bit of that bitterness to it. Let's bypass it and bring it in. And then bypass. Part of this is just making it louder, but it is also emphasizing that initial hit of that hammer going up and striking the string. So this would just be another example of using it. Mess around on your own for sure, experiment, and see what sort of variations you can get on your more percussive sounds.